sin, nothing but the blood of Jesus. All right.
Hello. Hello and good evening. My name is Brother Derrick Taylor, and welcome to the Harding Street Church of Christ Evening Devotional. It's my pleasure to be able to share a portion of God's Word with you today. The devotion I have for you today is entitled, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You may remember that title. I think most people are pretty familiar with the show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? I actually remember when it first aired on TV, and I remember watching it with my family when it first came on, and just imagining at the time how great it would be to have $1 million, to be rich. What a wonderful idea. At the time, I thought it was. One of my favorite movies, even before that show came on as a kid, was called Blank Check. And if you're not familiar with that movie, it's a film where this kid, he receives a blank check from a man who runs over his bike. And that man gives him the check, but he forges the number on the check to read out into $1 million. And he goes and he buys all the things that he wanted, even some of the things that as a kid I wanted, some of it even now. He buys a huge mansion, and the mansion has a water slide connected to it. He buys go-karts and all these other cool things that so many of us would like to have. And all these things seem to make him happy, and they seem to make us happy. And I start to ask myself a question: what is it about the idea of being rich that fascinates us as people? I think when we look at it, I would say there's many appealing ideas to being rich. One of the first ones being the ability to have financial freedom. The idea of if you have a lot of money, then therefore you have more liberty to be able to do things you want to do. Wealth frees us up from having to worry about some of life's concerns. How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to buy food? How am I going to afford a house or rent or shelter or my mortgage? How am I going to be able to get from point A to point B? You're able to secure transportation with the means of finances. Wealth eliminates all those worries that we have, especially in the blue collar community and even in the middle class. So now that we don't have to worry about these constant obstacles, we're able to have this liberty to go and buy the things that not just that we need, but now we can afford the things that we want as well. We can go on vacations. We can buy nice cars, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Escalades, fancy clothes, a bigger house, a mansion, or multiple houses. You can buy jewelry, diamonds, gold, all those things that, we like and enjoy and that look nice to have. Wealth, it gives us this sense of power as well, because people begin to treat you differently when you're wealthy, especially when they know you have money. They open doors that were initially closed to everyone else. They give you this access, almost like a member of an elite class that only you are able to get into. There's a phrase which is used among the young generation, especially now, to the point of nauseum. And the phrase is get to the bag. Get to the bag. A lot of you may have heard that one. This glorious money bag, which, if you're able to get to it, you'll be able to get everything that your heart desires. Well, when we look in the Bible, we see countless warnings about getting to the bag. We see countless warnings about the dangers of us valuing wealth. But we also see times where God blesses people with great gain. He gives them riches. He gives them, great materials. So we have to ask, what are we to make of this duality? Is being wealthy a bad thing, or is it a good thing? Well, let's take a look at that. Let's look at some examples where we're able to answer this question in the Bible. And I'll go over some of these briefly. God gave great wealth to Abraham. You can read this for yourself in Genesis 13:2. He also gave great wealth to King Solomon in 1 Kings 10:23. We also see that he rewarded Jacob in Genesis 30:43. And even so many others. He rewarded Joseph, and Job says he had great wealth. So I think we can say that being wealthy in and of itself is not a sin. If that was a sin, God surely would not have given these men the things that they had of the great wealth, great materials, in order to lead them into condemnation. That's just not how God functions. But God is able to bless us with great wealth, but we still have an obligation to put God first, whether we have $1 or $1 million. So it's not inherently wrong to have wealth, but it is wrong to put wealth in front of serving God. And when people tend to do that, it becomes an idol. And that can especially happen when you start to love money and you make it a priority. Jesus warns us directly in the Bible that it is extremely difficult to try to seek after God and to hold on to our riches at the same time. We find in Matthew chapter 19, verses 21 through 24 in the New King James Version, Jesus said to him, if you want to be perfect, he's talking to the rich young man at this time. He says to him, if you want to be perfect, go, sell what you have, give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Then Jesus said to his disciples, assuredly I say to you, that it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And again I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. So Jesus knew that even though this young man, this rich young man, who had great amounts of wealth, he said that to God that he was obedient. He had followed all of the 10 commandments of the law, but still he was lacking something. And we see that if he was forced to choose between either money or God, his choice was going to be money. And so at the acknowledgement of this, he turns and he walks away. So we have to be mindful of our desire for money, our desire for materials, especially because those things have an effect on our mind. They have an effect on our mood. If you've ever been at work, especially on a Monday, take a look around the office. Look at your coworkers' faces. Everyone that day seems to just be in a daze. They look like zombies. They're miserable. They're grumpy. They're unhappy. But when payday comes around, for some people that's on a Friday, especially if you work one of those jobs where you get a bonus in your check, the change, almost a 180. Everybody at work is almost floating around the office at that time. You see smiles, you hear laughter. So if in a small situation like that, you can see people change with just the regular hourly pay and a bonus on top of that, you can imagine how someone might be changed at having $1 million. Somebody might say to me, well, that's not me, Brother Derrick. I go to church and I love the Lord, but I can chase the bag at the same time and do all these things, and I can worship Jesus. Well, I would say that it's not wrong for you to want to pursue gain and want to do better for yourself. The rich man was doing a lot of these same things. He said he obeyed the law. He had money and great wealth. But when Jesus asked him that question, he already asked him the question knowing where he's going to place his love. And his love was placed in the money. Because if he had to turn around and give up all the things that he had gained, it was going to cause him a great deal of sadness rather than following after God. We see that especially today, how people prioritize the things in their life. Today, young women, especially, have let money take over the things that young women have let things corrupt them in their morals. We see that they're going online, they're selling pictures of themselves, they're selling videos of themselves, all because they have an opportunity to make upwards of some of them $100,000 in a month. There was even a report on the news from a teacher doing this very same thing, and she was fired from her job because they found out she was doing this. And young men, they're sacrificing their lives by committing robberies in broad daylight. They're committing murders, all for the opportunity of chasing after this bag that everyone wants. You see that in LA and various parts of the country that this is going on. They're going into stores in broad daylight and taking out jewelry and clothing racks, different things of that nature. So the pursuit of a better life and the means to do so is not wrong in and of itself. That's what we all want. We all want to be able to provide for ourselves, for our family, to be able to have a little bit extra, to be able to enjoy life a little bit as well. There's nothing wrong with that. The question is, what will that pursuit of the possibility of a better life, will it rob you from the guaranteed life that you will have in heaven with Christ? Will it take away from the from your heavenly kingdom that we're all seeking to get to? There's a famous line from the movie Wall Street where the character says, greed is good. And he says this because in order to gain wealth, especially immense wealth, we're all going to have to sacrifice something. Now, we're all going to have to give up something in order to get to that bag. You're going to have to spend less time with your family. You're going to have to stop hanging around your friends. You may even have to give up on having a family at all, having children. You may have to abandon certain morals that you have, because in business, it can be very cutthroat. It can be an environment where you're either a winner or you're a loser. If we look at the story of some of you are familiar with the drug Oxycontin, there was a CEO named Richard Sackler, and he was already a rich man, and his family owned the Purdue Pharma Company. But when his uncle died, he came up with a plan in order to keep that business alive. And that plan was to take a drug, which was essentially pure heroin, and give it to the common consumer in order to heal their various aches and pains. And when he does this, he does so by lying, by manipulation, by bribing people in power in order to get that drug to the market, because that's how much he wanted to make money. That's how much he wanted to have power. And what happened because of that is it created an opioid epidemic. But Richard Sackler became a billionaire, and the common American consumer became a drug addict or died. We find in 1 Timothy 6, 7 through 11, it says, "For we have brought nothing into this world, so it is clear that we cannot take anything out of it either. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who are not financially ethical and crave to get rich with a compulsive, greedy longing for wealth fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction, leading to personal misery. For the love of money, that is, the greedy desire for it and the willingness to gain it unethically, is a root of all sorts of evil. And some, by longing for it, have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves through and through with many sorrows. But as for you, O man of God, flee from these things, aim at and pursue righteousness, true goodness, moral conformity of the character of God, godliness, the fear of God, faith, love, steadfastness, and gentleness." So we cannot let money blind us from the real goal of obtaining eternal salvation in heaven. That's the real rich. That's the real riches. That's the real wealth that we all should be seeking. We all should be able to put those earthly goods aside and just forsake them. But if you want real wealth, you have to seek after spiritual wealth. And what are the consequences of spiritual wealth? I think the first consequence is that you get a relationship with God. And as that relationship develops, you start to want to let God help you improve who you are as a person. So you stop cursing. You stop going out to parties. You stop drinking excessively. You stop doing all the hedonistic things that everyone else in the world is doing. And because you don't want to do these things, you choose to focus on your relationship with God because you don't want to damage it. In that pursuit of spiritual wealth, you begin to start to develop characteristics, certain traits that even Christ had. You begin to develop patience, kindness, love, temperance, joy, peace, faithfulness, long suffering, all these fruits of the Spirit. This is the spiritual wealth that we should be seeking. Spiritual wealth has a great deal more benefits than earthly wealth can ever offer you. They may not be tangible like a Ferrari is, or Escalade, or Cadillac, or a mansion, but if you have the love of God inside of you, that's a value that will never depreciate, even until the end of time. So I hope you all choose to become a spiritual millionaire instead of a physical millionaire in this life. That's all I have for you today. May God bless you and keep you till we meet again.